So with that, I'm going to open it up to Sarah and Roger, and maybe Sarah, we'll start with you and then go to Roger. But, you know, as you think about what's happened the last couple of months, which none of us could have predicted, at least in all shapes and sizes, maybe talk about some of the obvious and non-obvious things that have happened that you've seen that might be interesting to the audience around your workforce and your leaders.
Absolutely. And thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here and chat with all of you this afternoon. So I think what we've found at Mastercard on that obvious side of your question is obviously the importance of digital. And probably like many of the organizations represented today, we've been on a digital transformation. And so the crisis wasn't necessarily about trying to adopt very quickly or set up new tools and technology. It was just that mindset piece that you talked about, which I think is pretty obvious, right? We're in a more distributed remote world now, and we need a workforce that can actually work in that way. So we did see the importance of digital being one obvious thing. A non-obvious takeaway for us, kind of a bright spot, is that we have noticed that silos are being broken down and we're actually making decisions faster, getting things to market quicker than we were in the old world before the global pandemic. And obviously that's a nice benefit that we've seen that we're exploring a bit more to capitalize on and figure out how we can take some of those learnings that led people to behave in certain ways and change mindsets on their own, even after we are past this pandemic.
There are some bright lights to virtual work, as much as we're getting fatigued. Roger, how about you? Right. Some obvious, non-obvious things.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Sarah. And it's a pleasure to be with you today. The obvious ones I'll hit first too, because those are pretty straightforward. And that is the obvious ones were around how to get our workforce home. So just to give you some perspective, we've been on the digital transformation. We've been thinking about how we work digitally and how we work virtually, and about 35% of our workforce was work at home or some sort of mobile or flex style prior, if you just go back to January 15th, pick a date. And now we have about 95% of our workforce at home due to the nature of our work. And the obvious things were the capabilities that we needed to do that. It's the basic hardware, software, the soft phones, the virtual kinds of ways that we could help our employees work. The non-obvious ones were as we were doing our employee listening, we were hearing key themes in capability to work and availability to work. And those two things are not the same. And so we were starting to have to adapt a lot of our processes, our routines, to Sarah's point, the way we made decisions and so forth. To people were capable of working virtually, but they weren't always available to work virtually because of the family situation, the children coming home, being sent home from school and so forth. And so we had to really change a lot of our routines, which caused us to kind of break out of the traditional mindset that we had to do the work, and it caused us to think differently. And about 3 weeks into the new way of working, one of our senior leaders said, well, why can't we do this all the time? Because to Sarah's point, we were working very differently. And the crisis led us into a way of working that was actually much more effective and much more integrated. Now, some of that we won't be able to sustain because there was just an all hands on deck kind of feel to it. But there's some things there that we need to make sure we preserve.
Is there, and this is to both you guys, there's been a lot of talk, as we've learned, right, on both the good and the bad of virtual work. Some people say, well, you can't replicate the water cooler discussion or the after the meeting in the office mentoring moment in a virtual world. What are you saying? Is that possible? Is it just we got to change our paradigm of how that gets done?
I'll jump in first. I think
go ahead.
Go ahead, Sarah.
No, go ahead.
I think some of that's to be determined, Scott. And I'd love to hear Sarah's take on this, because we looked at just break it down into, well, what's the on-site kinds of things that we did and we really needed to be on-site for, and what were the sort of off-site things that we could do. And then if you then break down the types of interactions that you have, from formal discussions and meetings and so forth to informal lunches or other kinds of informal conversations. And then you have the ad hoc, which I think is, to your point, the water cooler conversation. The ad hoc is the casual collisions that you have in the hallway or the lobby. And so if you break that down, what we're trying to do is rethink how this new way of working, you can manifest all of those without trying to go back to whatever it was before. Because I think we were saying this, we've gone through to use one of Jeff Bezos' terms, a one-way door on this one. I don't think we're going back to store. And, I think what we see on the other side is yet to be determined.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you said that, because this notion of serendipity, right, which people say, well, you can't have these random collisions in a virtual world. I just think we haven't thought hard enough about it, right? But Sarah,
and
how about you?
Yeah, I would agree with that, Scott. I think what we found is we now need to start thinking differently. So instead of trying to recreate the water cooler experience virtually, we need to think about a different type of experience, which gets us to that same outcome, right? Which is those serendipitous encounters. But it's not necessarily, and I don't know if other companies did this early on, it was like every day there was a virtual happy hour and a virtual lunch over Zoom, and the Zoom fatigue was real. And people finally said, I'm done. No more Zoom. I don't want to, Zoom coffee. I don't want to Zoom lunch. I don't want to Zoom happy hour. And so I think what we started to do was think of what is the outcome that we're striving for? And let's think of creative ways for us to do that, not just trying to take what was once physical and turn it virtual.
Yeah, one other idea, Scott, just real quick. Sorry, I'm talked over you there, but just one other quick idea is, and many companies have probably already done this, so I'm not probably saying anything you haven't done, but just using the food delivery services to have a team meeting. So have Grubhub just let people order. And so instead of trying to force a Zoom coffee or a Zoom lunch, just have the team leader buy lunch for everybody and let everybody order through the Grubhub and have it meeting at the same time. So it's kind of taking we tried to take what we were doing in the office to Zoom.
Yeah.
Now let's figure out how to do this differently. This creates a little bit of a wow moment for your team and others in it. So anyways, just an idea.
It's a little bit what retailers have been kind of struggling with for years to get to, quote, omni-channel experiences, right? Where the retail staff recognizes you when you walk into the store, but then when you're online, you get all the best of being online, right? The expansive ability to search for things. And I think this is all new. So we're probably at the early stage of the journey of what's the best of both worlds, right? We can optimize